Hey there, Mr. Mystery here. Tonight, we re-cracking open the walls of one of America's most infamous haunted houses, where real horror began, not with ghosts, but with gunfire in the dark. Before you drift off, drop a comment below. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? Settle in, listen to the rain, and remember, not every monster wears a sheet and rattles chains. Some monsters live right next door. Let's begin. 112 Ocean Avenue, Amityville, New York. A Dutch colonial house with neat white shingles, a broad front lawn, those weird quarter-moon windows peeking out of the attic, the ones that made people swear it looked like it had eyes. Watching, back in the early 70s, it was just another Long Island family home, the kind you'd drive by and not even notice. Until November 13th, 1974, when a 23-year-old man named Ronald DeFeo Jr. picked up a .35 caliber Marlin rifle and turned every quiet room inside that house into a crime scene that would echo forever. The DeFeos seemed like any other family from the outside. Ronald Sr., the father, strict, loud, old-school Italian, ran a Buick dealership, barked orders at dinner. Louise, the mother, quiet, devout Catholic, kept the house spotless. For kids besides Ronnie Jr., Dawn, Allison, Mark, and John Matthew, the youngest was only 9. Ronnie Jr. was different. Everyone knew it. He drank too much, snapped at his father, drifted through work shifts half-drunk. Rumors said he pocketed dealership cash when no one was looking. He was angry. He said the house felt like a prison. On November 13th, sometime around 3:15 a.m., while his parents and siblings slept, Ronnie Jr. loaded his rifle and went room to room. 6 shots for his parents in their bed. 2 for Dawn, 18, found sprawled across her pillow. 2 for Allison, just 13. The bullet caught her in mid-turn, maybe waking up to her brother's footsteps. 2 for Mark and John Matthew, curled up together in the bunk room, pajamas rumpled like any other school night. No one in that house screamed. Or if they did, the neighbors never heard them. Or they lied about what they heard. Ronnie went to work that morning like nothing happened. Later, he walked into a local bar shouting, "You gotta help me. I think my mother and father are shot." Police found him wailing in the front yard. But by sunrise the next day, he'd cracked under questioning. "Once I started, I just couldn't stop." He blamed voices. He said the house whispered to him, told him how to do it, when to pull the trigger, when to reload. People wanted to believe he was just crazy, drugged up. But the seeds of something darker took root in the town that week. What if the house itself wanted blood? Ronnie Jr. went to trial. The defense tried to play the insanity card. The jury didn't buy it. They said it was cold-blooded murder, not demons or devils. He got 6 life sentences and spent the rest of his days behind bars, telling anyone who'd listen that voices made him do it. That should have been the end. A gruesome family tragedy, wrapped up in a headline, forgotten once the next monster came along. But Ocean Avenue didn't stay quiet. A year later, new owners moved in. George and Kathy Lutz, newly married, blending their kids into one big family. They bought the house cheap, real cheap for Long Island. They knew what had happened there, and they said they didn't care. It was beautiful. It's big enough for the kids to have their own rooms. They thought maybe they could wash the blood off the walls and start fresh. They didn't know the walls had other plans. On December 18th, 1975, the Lutz family crossed the threshold with a moving truck full of boxes and bright ideas about Christmas and their new dream home. They'd last exactly 28 days. The first sign was small, or so they claimed later. Doors that locked themselves. Cold spots in warm rooms. The family dog, Harry, barking at an empty staircase until his voice went hoarse. Then came the priest. Father Ralph Pecoraro, or Father Mancuso, as he was called in the book to protect his name, came to bless the house. He sprinkled holy water in the upstairs bedrooms. When he reached what used to be the DeFeo boys' room, he said he heard a voice, deep guttural, not his own. "Get out," he left without finishing the blessing. When he called George to warn him, the phone crackled with static so loud they could barely hear each other. Father Mancuso would later claim he got sick after that visit. Blisters on his hands that looked like stigmata inside the house. Things turned mean fast. George Lutz claimed he woke up at 3:15 a.m. every night, the same time Ronnie DeFeo had pulled the trigger. He said he heard footsteps in the hall, doors slamming shut when no one else was awake. Cold air clung to him like fingers, even with the fireplace roaring. Kathy felt invisible arms wrap around her in bed. She said she smelled cheap perfume in rooms where no one had stood for days. One night, she said she woke to see an old woman in ragged white floating at the foot of her bed. Eyes black, mouth slack, hair drifting like cobwebs. The kids claimed the windows slammed on their fingers without warning. They heard the walls whisper. Missy, the youngest, started talking to a pig-faced spirit named Jody, an imaginary friend who told her secrets about what lay under the floorboards. George grew thin, wouldn't eat. He chopped firewood all night just to stay warm, said the house hated warmth, hated light. Some nights he'd stand at the boathouse dock staring into the black canal, waiting for something to crawl out. One morning, Kathy found cloven hoof prints in the snow outside the house. No other prints. Just those deep impressions circling the house like something pacing. 28 days. That's all it took for the Lutz family to flee Ocean Avenue in the dead of night, leaving everything behind. Clothes in drawers, food on the counters, the Christmas tree still lit up in the window. They never spent another night there. Was it real? Or was it just a story they told to pay the mortgage? Years later, George and Kathy Lutz stood by it. They swore under oath that what they saw in that house was no hoax, that the evil inside Ocean Avenue was bigger than any courtroom could prove. Skeptics poked holes in it all. Some said the lawyer who helped them write the book about their ordeal made half of it up. Neighbors claimed the scariest thing about the Lutz house was the TV crews camped on the lawn. But the story stuck. Stuck because people want to believe that sometimes a house remembers the worst things that happen inside its walls. That if the blood is deep enough, the floorboards never forget. And so the Amityville horror was born. Real murders, real bodies, and maybe something else that slipped between the cracks when the DeFeos died in their beds. People still drive past 112 Ocean Avenue today. The famous quarter-moon windows are gone. New owners remodeled the attic to stop, looky-loose from parking outside at midnight. But those who believe say the evil never left. It just learned how to hide better. When George and Kathy Lutz abandoned 112 Ocean Avenue that freezing January night, they didn't just leave behind furniture and family photos. They left behind a story too big to stay locked behind boarded-up windows. They moved into Kathy's mother's house in Deer Park, trying to start over, but the press found them. Neighbors whispered. Reporters called it America's most haunted house before anyone even printed the first draft of the book. The cover alone was enough to make you pull the blanket closer. That famous house sketch, black windows like staring eyes. Enter Jay Anson, the writer who turned their sleepless month into a book that would sell millions. The Amityville Horror, a true story. The book claimed George and Kathy suffered attacks that no priest could cleanse. Black ooze seeping from keyholes, green slime dripping from the walls. A swarm of flies in winter, thick enough to choke the windows in Father Mancuso's study. Cold spots that bit into the skin, breath freezing in your own living room. Now Jody had red glowing eyes that watched her from the second-floor window while George chopped wood outside. One page claimed George levitated off his bed. Another said Kathy felt invisible hands grab her in the kitchen, pushing her against the counters until bruises bloomed under her nightgown. Missy's imaginary friend, Jody, wasn't just a sweet pig-faced spirit anymore. By the time the book hit shelves in 1977, it was too late to put the ghost back in the attic. The press wanted more. TV specials, talk shows. Everyone wanted to ask George the same thing. Did you make it up? They brought psychics who walked the halls whispering prayers, courting odd knocks and strange shadows that flickered just out of reach. George always said the same thing. Come spend a night there yourself. Some swear it is. John Matthew DeFeo. The youngest boy shot in his bunk bed by his brother. Others say it's just one of the crew crouched behind a doorframe, and some did. The Warrens, Ed and Lorraine, rolled up in their beat-up sedan like a traveling exorcist show. Lorraine claimed to feel the presence of a demonic entity so strong it nearly drove her out the front door before she even crossed the threshold, hoping to cash in on a murder house with a headline that would never die. Ed filmed basement cold spots with his clunky 70s camcorder. Then came the famous Ghost Boy photo, snapped by Gene Campbell, a cameraman who followed the Warrens that night. A small figure peeking from the hallway, eyes glowing white in the flash. But ghost stories are stubborn things. They grow teeth when people want them to bite. Not everyone bought it. Maybe the Lutzes hallucinated cold spots and voices in the walls. Maybe the stress of moving into a murder house cracked their nerves wide open. Neighbors pointed out that the Lutzes never missed a chance to talk to TV reporters. A lawyer named William Weber, who once defended Ronnie DeFeo Jr., claimed he sat at George's kitchen table and helped dream up the haunting over bottles of wine. They asked, "How do you fake hoof prints in fresh snow when no one else was around?" Years later, Weber said, "We created this horror story over many bottles of wine. It is a hoax." George fired back that Weber just wanted a cut of the book profits. Sometimes he said a demon made him do it. Sometimes it was his sister Dawn who pulled the trigger first. Sometimes he just smirked and said the house knew how to keep its secrets. A new family every decade claiming they heard footsteps upstairs when no one was home. The attic windows were remodeled so they'd look less like eyes and more like ordinary glass. But true crime pilgrims still find it, still park outside at night, still roll down the window and swear they feel something cold drift through the open door. 2 men, 1 murder house, and a secret nobody could nail down for sure. Skeptics dug deeper. They found old gas lines leaking carbon monoxide. But believers didn't care. They pointed to the photos. The priest's strange rashes. The cold that even roaring fires couldn't kill. Over the next few years, the legend fed itself. A half-dozen movies, each one bloodier than the last. Sequels, remakes. Most people Dante realized the families who moved in after the Lutzes didn't hear a peep. No green slime, no flies, no pig-faced Jody whispering bedtime secrets. Just tourists parking outside at 2 a.m. with flashlights, hoping the attic windows would glare back. George and Kathy Lutz stuck to their story until they died. Kathy in 2004, George in 2006. They passed lie detector tests back in the 70s. Not courtroom evidence, but enough to keep believers satisfied that they weren't just ghost story salesmen. Ronnie DeFeo Jr., the one who started it all, spent the rest of his life behind bars, changing his story every few years. The Cromartys were next. They bought the place in the late 70s. A new address on the mailbox to confuse the kids who parked out front at midnight, daring each other to knock on the door. He died in March 2021, buried without ever giving the world a final answer. Just say the word and everyone saw the same thing. 6 bodies under sheets. A young couple running barefoot into the snow. A ghost pig named Jody pressed against the glass. And the house, it's still there on Ocean Avenue. The address was changed once to throw off thrill seekers. They moved out quietly when the attention got too heavy to bear. Maybe it's just the breeze off the canal. Or maybe it's a whisper from the walls. The same voice Ronnie Jr. claimed he heard at 3:15 a.m., telling him to pick up the rifle. So what do you believe? The first Amityville horror movie came out in 1979, just 2 years after the book exploded. But you can't stop the late-night dare, a family massacre that left echoes in the wood beams. By the late 80s, Amityville was less a real house and more a Hollywood franchise. Haunted mirrors, haunted dolls, haunted lamps. The real bodies that started it all got buried under cheap jump scares and plastic demons. A clever hoax that turned tragedy into profit. Or something older. Something that lives in the dark corners of every house, that's seen too much grief to ever really rest. The real horror of Amityville isn't just what happened in one night in 1974. It's that no one can quite agree what's true, what's rumor, and what might still be watching from the attic. If you stand in the street too long and wait for the lights to flicker on, after the Lutzes fled, Ocean Avenue sat empty for a while. A cold white shell everyone recognized, but no one wanted. He swore it wasn't fake. For a moment, realtors tried to scrub the blood from the deed. New paint, new attic windows to hide the house's eyes. But the name stuck. Still, people moved in. They always do. After all, a big Long Island Dutch colonial for a fraction of the market price is too tempting for some. They knew the story, but they had no patience for ghost hunters stomping through their lawn at night. They put up no trespassing signs. They told reporters the only horror they faced was the line of tourists knocking at their door with cheap cameras and breathless questions. No slime, no cold spots, no cloven hoof prints in the snow. They sued the Lutzes and Jay Anson's publisher for defamation. They've dragged on for years. Claims and counterclaims over whether George and Kathy invented the haunting with help from their lawyer. True crime tours that sneak you down Ocean Avenue at midnight if you slip the guy to 50. Get out like the priest claimed they did the first time he tried to bless the DeFeo's old bedroom. People swear they hear footsteps on the dock behind the boathouse. The same dock where George Lutz said he'd stand at 3 in the morning watching the black water ripple like it was alive. The Cromartys just wanted people to let them live in peace, but the damage was done. You can sell a house cheap, but you can't change its name once the stories stick. Movie studios circled like sharks. It made millions. A sequel, another sequel. Every new family who tried to live there faced the same problem. You can change the windows, paint the siding, tear down the boathouse. Teenagers would drive in from Queen's Park under the oaks, kill the headlights, and wait for the attic to glare back. Some swear they see shadows in those windows, a shape that flickers when the moon dips behind the chimney. It's probably nothing. Maybe it's just the streetlights, or the way the mind races when you want it to. The house changed hands half a dozen times. One owner filed bankruptcy, another flipped it quick for profit. Each time, reporters stuck a microphone over the fence. Any ghosts yet? Each new owner swore. No voices, no slime, no Jody. But still, the questions stayed. The Lutz kids grew up too. Daniel Lutz, the oldest, did a rare interview decades later. Grizzled, jaw tight, eyes restless. He swore it wasn't fake. Said his stepfather George dabbled in the occult before they ever moved in, messing around with secret rituals, trying to open doors he didn't understand. Daniel said the darkness didn't follow the house. It followed George. Is that the truth? Just another ghost layered on top of the rest. It's hard to say when the lawyers, the ghost hunters, the horror movie remakes, all feed off the same question. What really happened behind that front door? Sometimes the simplest story is the hardest to accept. That one broken young man, Ronnie DeFeo Jr., slaughtered his family for reasons no one can ever fully map out. And the rest, the cold spots, the slime, the pig in the window, might be just what we do to keep the real horror at bay. A gunshot in the dark is too real. A ghost is easier to blame. Yet some people swear. There is something inside that house that doesn't care if you believe. A chill under the floorboards. Silence too thick to be just old plumbing. If the walls could talk, maybe they'd laugh at the stories. Or maybe they'd whisper, "Get out," like the priest claimed they did the first time he tried to bless the DeFeo's old bedroom. Even now, the legend pulls in fresh blood. New podcasts, new docustories, true crime tours that sneak you down Ocean Avenue at midnight if you slip the guy to 50. The address might change, but the story never does. Sometimes at night, when the wind is right off the Atlantic, in the marshes, breathe mist through the trees, people swear they hear footsteps on the dock behind the boathouse. The same dock where George Lutz said he'd stand at 3 in the morning watching the black water ripple like it was alive. Maybe the footsteps belong to Ronnie DeFeo's restless ghost. Or maybe they're just yours, standing too close to a house that remembers every scream, every whispered lie, every dollar made off its old bones. One thing is for sure. The house on Ocean Avenue is more alive than any ghost it has ever been accused of holding. It eats headlines, spits out sequels, and it always leaves the front door cracked just wide enough for the next unlucky soul who thinks they braver than the last. Decades passed. The front lawn greened up every spring. The attic windows got new shutters. Realtors kept the number off the mailbox so tourists wouldn't knock at 3 a.m. It's begging to peek at the basement door where the Lutzes said they heard growls in the pipes. The new owners. Some say they lived there for years without so much as a slammed door. They hosted backyard barbecues, paid the mortgage, raised kids who grew up hearing whispers in town about the place they called home. Porters stopped calling. Mostly, a new horror movie would drop every few years, dredging up the same yellowed crime scene photos of the DeFeo bedsheets. The bullet holes, the pale faces frozen in black and white forever. A new TV ghost crew would knock on the neighbor's door, camera lights buzzing, asking if they'd heard any footsteps lately. Most said no. Some just shut the door. It was easier to pretend the legend belonged to someone else's block. But people still drive by Ocean Avenue. They roll down the window at midnight, engine idling, eyes on the second floor. They want to see something flicker behind the glass, a face, a shape, just enough to say they felt it too. Because deep down, people want to believe a house can remember, that it can hold the weight of what happened there like an echo that never fades. For the believers, it's all still alive under the shingles. The priest's trembling hands when he heard the voice say, "Get out." The Lutz kids screaming when the windows slammed shut on their fingers. George barefoot in the snow, chopping wood at dawn because the cold in his bones wouldn't leave him alone. Ronnie DeFeo Jr., waking up every night at 3:15 a.m., staring at his rifle leaning by the dresser like it was waiting for him, and the real horror. Maybe it's not the ghost pig or the green slime or the cold spots. Maybe it's not the eyes in the attic window. Maybe it's the simple truth that sometimes evil wears an ordinary face. A son who loads a rifle while his family sleeps. A man who tells himself the voices made him do it, because the real reasons are too ugly to admit. The legend never needed a ghost. The murders alone are enough to stain those walls forever, and the story that bloomed from the blood. The book, the movie, the endless reboots. They're just the house breathing through our nightmares, reminding us that sometimes the scariest thing isn't a ghost at the end of the hallway. It's a locked door that doesn't keep the bad things out or in. A creak on the stairs, a breath behind the wall, or maybe just your own heartbeat echoing back all the fear you brought with you. One family's tragedy, one couple's story, one house that never really belonged to the people who paid the mortgage. It belongs to us now, the ones who whisper about it in the dark, who lean closer when the rain hits the window, wondering if some places really do keep the worst parts alive, just so they Dante have to die alone. So sleep well tonight if you can. And if you wake up at 3:15 a.m., don't look at the window. Don't listen too close to the pipes. Some stories don't want you to forget them. It was 1924 when the Hotel Cecil first opened its brass doors on Main Street. Back then, Los Angeles was booming. Oil money, movie lots, orange groves baking in the sun. The Cecil was built to be grand. Marble lobby floors, stained glass windows, 700 rooms, each with hot water and polished brass keys. It was the jewel of Skid Row before Skid Row became what it is now. But the shine didn't last long. When the Great Depression hit, families vanished overnight. Wealthy guests fled to safer hotels uptown. The Cecil's grand halls stayed, but its rooms filled with the lonely, the broken, the desperate. By the 1930s, the place earned its first nickname, the Suicide. A man poisoned himself in 1931. A maid found another guest with his wrists, slid in 1934. A Navy vet jumped from the 7th floor in 1937. He said his shoes were still lined up by the window, like he planned to come back for them. People said the Cecil swallowed sadness whole. If you wanted to disappear in LA, you checked into the Cecil, a place where no one asked questions if you paid cash and closed your curtains tight. By the 1940s, Skid Row bloomed around it. Drifters, addicts, runaways. The Cecil's marble lobby turned gray with cigarette smoke and the smell of old carpet. Desk clerks learned to stop asking guests how long they'd stay. Sometimes it was just one night, bottle of whiskey and a broken window latch. Rumors say it wasn't just suicides. Some whispered about shadows in the hall, lights flicking on in empty rooms. Cold pocket of air you feel when you step off the elevator at 3 a.m. when the city. His heartbeat is just rats in the alley and sirens bouncing off concrete. In the 1980s, a man named Richard Ramirez moved in for a while. You know him as the Night Stalker. Night after night, he hunted the city, breaking into homes, leaving bodies like twisted warnings. Then he'd slip back through the Cecil's side door, blood still under his fingernails, his shoes scraping the tiled floors. Other guests barely noticed. No one looked twice at a man in filthy black jeans and a grin sharp enough to cut. The Cecil's hallways saw worse every night. 10 years later, another killer checked in. Jack Unterweger, an Austrian journalist who came to LA to write about crime. Charmed cops, hung out at dive bars, told everyone he was reformed. But he was strangling sex workers on the side, just like he'd done back home before prison and parole. Some say he chose the Cecil because Ramirez had left an echo behind, like the walls knew how to hide a monster when it needed to. They say it's cursed. Maybe it's a just coincidence. A cheap hotel in a part of town where bad things find you fast? Or maybe something inside the bricks soaks up misery and keeps it breathing. Guests claim the elevator creaks in the dead of night, stopping on floors no one pressed. They say they hear footsteps in the hall, tapping past their door when no one's checked in on that floor for weeks. But the story that sealed the Cecil's name for good, didn't come in the 30s or the Night Stalker years? It came in 2013. A young woman named Eliza Lamb, a Canadian student traveling solo, writing soft blog posts about adventure and feeling lost in a city she barely knew. She checked in alone. Room 412. A week later, she was gone. Vanished into the echoing maze of the Cecil's hallways. How does a girl disappear in a building so old it should squeak out secrets in its sleep? How does an elevator video clip turn a tragedy into an unsolved ghost story the whole world still argues about? Stick with me. Next, we'll ride that elevator up. We'll stand in the lobby with the night manager and the CCTV flickering. We'll follow the stories that say the Cecil isn't just haunted by the dead. It makes the living vanish too. By early February 2013, the Hotel Cecil was halfway forgotten by Los Angeles. It had changed names. Tried to scrub off the ghosts by calling itself Stay on Main. Rebranding as a budget spot for young travelers who didn't know what happened on those upper floors. Eliza Lamb didn't know, not really. Or maybe she did. Maybe the legend whispered enough for her to wonder if she'd wake up to creaking pipes or cold fingers brushing her hair while she slept. She was 21, a student from Vancouver. She wrote gentle blogs about feeling small in big cities, about bookstores and coffee cups and new places to get lost. She wanted adventure, not trouble. But the Cecil wasn't exactly on TripAdvisor's safe for solo travelers list. She checked in anyway, asked for a shared room at first, then switched to her own after her bunkmates complained she acted strange, talking to herself, leaving notes on the bed, restless like she couldn't settle her thoughts. January blurred into February. She called her parents every day, little updates to make them worry less. The city's huge. I'm fine. Just exploring. Then the calls stopped. When the hotel staff realized she hadn't checked out, they shrugged. Guests vanished all the time here. Maybe she wandered off to see San Francisco. Maybe she met someone and didn't come back. But her luggage was still in the room. Wallet, her meds. No one saw her leave the lobby. Then came the elevator video. Grainy, night black and ghost gray. Eliza in a red hoodie and black shorts. She slips through the elevator doors, head half hidden under the brim of her sweatshirt. She punches all the buttons in a single row. The door doesn't close. She steps out, peeks left, peeks right, steps back in. She presses her back into the corner like she's hiding from someone or something. Then she moves her hands. Wide, strange gestures like she's pushing invisible walls away or talking to someone the camera can't see. She steps out again. Gone down the hallway. The elevator door stays open, swallowing stale air until it finally slides shut. When the LAPD released the video, the internet lost its mind. Millions watched those flickering seconds on repeat, trying to decode her movements like they were secret code. Was she playing? Running from someone? Seeing something no one else could see? No one found her. 2 weeks passed. Guests started to complain the water tasted bad. Showers sputtered out dark, foul-smelling drips. When maintenance climbed the metal stairs to the rooftop water tanks, they lifted the hatch and found her, floating face down in the dark. No clothes, no sign of how she got there. To get up there, she'd have needed a key to a locked door and an alarmed stairwell. Or she'd have had to scale an outside fire escape, boost herself up a slick metal tank, pry open the heavy hatch, and slip inside alone in the night. The coroner ruled it accidental drowning. No drugs in her system strong enough to make her hallucinate. Just her prescription for bipolar disorder, the same one she'd written about on her blog for years. But that didn't quiet the ghosts. People said the elevator video showed something inside the hotel wanted her, lured her into places no guest should find. Others claimed she was possessed by the Cecil's history, by the suicides. The unsolved murders, the Night Stalker's echo in the drywall. One rumor claimed her death mirrored an old horror movie, Dark Water, where a girl climbs into a rooftop tank and drowns alone, haunting the building's pipes. When people looked up the hotel's past, they found twisted trivia that during a 2007 outbreak of tuberculosis in Skid Row, the test used was called the La Melissa coincidence, probably. But rumor doesn't care about logic. It feeds on shadows and what-ifs, the same way the Cecil feeds on the lost. After Eliza Lamb, the Cecil's new owners tried to rebrand again. Renovations, a boutique hostel. New signs that hid the old brass letters, but the ghosts still slipped through. Podcasters whisper her name. Ghost hunters break into the rooftop stairwell, hoping to feel what she felt, or to see what she might have seen in that hallway before she vanished from the camera's eye forever. People say if you ride the elevator late at night, punch all the buttons like Eliza did. You'll feel it too. That sudden drop in your gut when the doors don't close. That sense that someone is standing right behind you, breathing too slow for a living thing. So maybe the C-cell isn't haunted by ghosts. Maybe it's haunted by loneliness. By the heavy weight of so many lost souls stacking up like forgotten luggage behind the front desk. And maybe, just maybe, it's waiting for the next guest, who docent mind sharing their room with something no lock can keep out. Before Eliza Lamb, before Richard Ramirez, the Cecil was already soaked through with sadness. It started in the 1930s, a string of deaths that turned into local folklore. People didn't talk about them at first, not out loud. But the front desk clerks knew, the maids knew. The cops knew too, every time they got the call that another window latch had popped, that another body was waiting on the sidewalk like a question mark. In 1931, a man named W.K. Norton checked in under a fake name. Nobody noticed him much. He kept to himself, didn't make a mess. When the maid knocked after a few days, she found him cold in bed, a handful of poison pills rattling in the nightstand drawer. Then there was Benjamin Dodick, minus 25, shot ringing out behind a locked door in 1932. Nobody saw him come in with the gun. Nobody saw him leave. Grace Magro, in 1937. She didn't jump from a window. She fell, or was pushed, or maybe leaned too far out over the edge. When the city lights looked too pretty to resist, she hit telephone wires on the way down, bounced against them like a rag doll, finally landing in a tangled mess of hair and silk and broken bones. Some say she was on T alone in the room when she went out that window, but no one ever proved it. The stories stacked up, floor by floor. 1944. A young woman named Dorothy Purcell checked into a room with her boyfriend. She was 20, was older, a salesman on the road. Dorothy went into labor that night, alone in the bathroom, while he snored through his dreams on clean hotel sheets. Nobody knew she was pregnant. Maybe she didn't know either. Not really. She gave birth in the dark and, in a daze, dropped the baby out the window. They found the tiny body on the hotel's roof next door. Dorothy swore she thought the baby was stillborn. The judge believed her enough to call it insanity. The papers called it something else. A sign the Cecil was swallowing hope and spitting out ghosts. By the 1960s, locals gave the place nicknames. The Suicide,
Death,
the Murder Hotel. Some said it was cursed. Others said it was just cheap. When you've got nowhere to go, you take what you can get. Even if it comes with a view you can trust yourself to stand too close to. And maybe it really did attract the lost. People who wanted to leave the world without having to say goodbye. It was easy. Just checked in with cash, slipped the key into your pocket, and let the hallway swallow you. But not every story ended quietly. Goldie Asgood, Pigeon Goldie, they called her. She was sweet, harmless, an older woman who fed the birds in Pershing Square every day. A tiny bag of crumbs, wide smile under a battered hat. In 1964, they found her in her room at the Cecil, strangled, ransacked. Her cap lay beside her, feathers stuck to the carpet like a sad final offering. The police picked up a suspect, a drifter covered in blood. But it didn't stick. Nobody ever paid for Goldie's death. The city just shrugged and shuffled on. Some nights, people say they still see her. A woman in a faded coat, standing by the mailboxes in the lobby. Seeds in her palm, pigeons no one else can see, pecking at invisible crumbs. People checked out without paying the bill in more ways than one. The paperwork piled up, accidental overdoses, open windows, no witnesses. Some say a building can soak all that misery in, brick by brick. Some say that's nonsense. But if you stand in the lobby at 3 a.m., when the elevators hum and the walls tick with old pipes, maybe you'll hear it. The hush of footsteps on the stairwell that shouldn't be there. A door that clicks open behind you when the night manager swears nobody's on that floor. Maybe it's just the old bones of the building settling, or maybe it's the people who never really left. Not properly. 100 half-told endings waiting in the walls. And above it all, the rooftop water tanks, cold, black, and still, holding the last echoes of the girl who floated alone. holding the shadows of every name the Cecil swallowed before her. They tried to change its name, stay on Main. They painted new signs, new bright colors. The lobby got a new coat of polish, slick modern furniture that pretended the carpet wasn't older than the guests. But the bones remember, you can give the ghost a fresh coat of paint, but the eyes behind the doors never blink. No one. How many stories really sleep behind those thin walls? The official record says dozens. The rumor mill says hundreds. And the real horror. Most didn't even make the papers. Just another body bag wheeled out the side door before the next guest arrived to sign the register and hope their key worked. And maybe that's why people still check in. It's not because they were looking for a cheap bed, but because they want to stand at the elevator doors like Eliza did, watching the numbers flicker in the stale light, wondering if they'll see what she saw, or feel that invisible thing that turns a hotel into a question no one can answer. The Hotel Cecil could have faded into just another crumbling building, lost in a part of downtown LA. Most people pretend docent exist when they sip lattes a few blocks north. But the Cecil has a talent for staying alive. Even when its guests don't. The stories spilled out, floor by floor, decade by decade. By the 2000s, the building's reputation was so stained it found a new home. Not in real estate, but in pop culture. The elevator footage of Elisa Lam circled the internet like a ghost ship drifting through. YouTube clips, conspiracy forums, late-night Reddit threads, where strangers swore they could see a second shadow slip behind her shoulder. Just before the door finally closed, people said the Cecil was cursed. A psychic once claimed the walls bled grief like a wound that never scabs over. TV crews rolled up with handheld EMF meters and flickering night vision cams. Ghost adventures locked themselves in overnight, daring something to whisper back. They said they heard footsteps on empty floors. Doors slammed where there were no doors left to swing. Maybe they caught it on tape. Maybe they just caught the creaks and groans of a building so old it sighs when the city breathes. It didn't matter if it was true. The story stuck because people needed it to. Horror movies latched on. American Horror Story. Hotel turned the legend into TV candy. Blood-soaked carpets. Haunted hallways. Beautiful monsters. But the real monster never needed fangs or faked jump scares. The real monster was always the city itself. Hungry for bodies, hungry for stories. The Cecil just held them in one place long enough for the rest of us to notice. There were ghost tours, groups of curious out-of-towners, clutching coffees and cheap digital cameras, trailing a guide who pointed up at the fire escapes and whispered about the Night Stalker brushing past them in 1985, carrying a paper bag with a .22 pistol inside. They'd stand by the locked door to the rooftop and wonder if Eliza Lam really climbed that fire escape alone in the dark. If the hatch was really too heavy for her to lift by herself, they'd ask about the suicides. Did the ghosts lean out the window first, or did the windows call to them, saying, "Jump, jump, jump into the hot LA air"? But if you ask the people who still live around Skid Row, the Cecil is just another broken place full of broken stories. It's a cheap room when you've got nowhere else to go. It's a bed where you can disappear for a while, whether you mean to or not. The owners rebranded it again. Stay on Main, and made part of it a hostel. Bright paint, hip young staff who didn't mention the name Cecil unless you asked. They locked up the old sign behind scaffolding, hoping the legend would stay buried under Instagram selfies and cheap weekend bookings. But a name like that doesn't die easy. They say the old sign is still up there, covered in tarps. Letters half faded behind the scaffolding. If you stand at the corner of Main and 7th just right, you can see the outline at dusk. When the sun hits the brick the same way it did in 1924, and the first clerk handed out the first brass key to a guest who couldn't guess how many more would check in behind him, never to check out again. So tonight, if you're lying there, rain tapping on your window, eyes blinking slow, remember the Cecil is still there. A stone skeleton on the edge of downtown, breathing in the hum of the streetlights and the shuffle of feet on cracked pavement. Maybe it's just a building. Maybe it's just old pipes, old stories. Or maybe it's something more. A place that holds on to the lonely, the desperate, the ones who slip through the cracks. The real horror, E&T, the ghosts that linger in the hallways. It says the city that forgets them the moment the elevator door slides shut. Sleep well tonight if you can. And if you ever find yourself staring at your own reflection in an elevator mirror at 3 a.m., think about the buttons you press. Think about the floors you didn't mean to visit. And maybe, just maybe, when that door drifts open, you'll know enough to stay inside. Thanks for checking in with me tonight. Stay curious. Sleep safe. Some hotels never really check you out. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine the year is 1817. You're standing in the soft, rolling fields of Adams, Tennessee. The sun's melting behind the trees, and the Red River drifts by like a slow, sleepy thought. But beneath those calm woods, something old and restless stirs. The Bell family didn't know it yet, but their quiet farm was about to become the stage for America's most chilling ghost story. John Bell was a proud farmer. By all accounts, he was respected, maybe even a little feared. He owned good land, a good house, good slaves, though history doesn't hide that part. Back then, wealth came with shadows. One evening, John was out by the cornfield. He carried his rifle, same as always. The woods were thick with critters, foxes, maybe the odd bobcat. But that night, he saw something. Some folks say it was a strange animal, crouched near the fence line, body like a dog. But the head, they said, was shaped like a rabbit's. Its eyes, too wide, too still. He raised his musket, aimed down the sight. Crack! Shot echoed through the dusk. But when the smoke cleared, the thing was gone. No blood, no fur, just the hush of wind through the corn. Personally, I've always wondered, did John really see a beast? Or was it the first glimpse of something else? A sign, a warning, a curse taking shape in the twilight. What do you think? Did you stand alone in those fields after dark? Back home, the strange sights didn't stop. John's youngest daughter, sweet Betsy Bell, was the first to feel the house change. It started soft, a tapping in the walls, a faint scratch, like a mouse behind the plaster. At first, the family blamed rats. They set traps. No rats. They pulled up floorboards, found nothing but dry earth and the smell of damp pine. Then the tapping grew teeth. Some nights, Betsy would wake to her blanket sliding off the bed. Cold air on her feet, a soft tug at her hair. A giggle, so faint you'd swear it came from inside your own head, locals whispered. Maybe the house was built on cursed ground. Maybe an old spirit clung to the Red River's banks. Or maybe, just maybe, the Bells had made an enemy. The stories point to Kate Batts, the so-called witch. She was a neighbor. Folks said she was peculiar. Her husband Frederick had died owing debts. And rumor had it, John Bell cheated her in a land deal over just a few acres near the river. In the village, they'd hiss behind her back that Kate Batts. She's a witch, you know. She talks to shadows. But here's the thing. No record shows Kate ever confessed to cursing anyone. She was alive when the haunting began. If you ask me, maybe people needed a name, a face to pin their fear on. What do you think? Did Kate really whisper curses into the wind? Or did the Bells' own guilt twist into something they couldn't explain? By the next winter, the house was alive at night, knocks at the doors when no one was there. Heavy footsteps pacing the attic. Voices mumbling prayers in a language no one recognized. Lucy Bell, John's wife. People say she was a gentle soul, deeply faithful. One night, she sat by the fireplace, Bible open on her knees. She asked the air, "Who are you?" The answer came low and mocking, like a drunk man weeping in the dark. "I am a spirit, once happy but disturbed." Imagine hearing that voice when the lamps are out. Your children asleep down the hall. What would you do? Would you run? Would you fight? Or would you sit there, listening to the whispers crawl across the ceiling? Word spread fast through Robertson County. Neighbors came with lanterns, pitchforks, psalms on their lips. One night, John's friend James Johnson stayed over, determined to expose the trick. They sat by Betsy's bed, waiting. Hours passed. Silence, creaking floors, the smell of tallow candles burning low. Then it came, a loud smack like a hand slapping skin. Betsy cried out, her cheek red with a handprint that wasn't there a second before. James Johnson fell to his knees and prayed so hard his voice cracked. But the giggle came again, soft, drifting through the rafters. Betsy. The Bell Witch, or Kate, as folks called her, started to speak clearer every week. Sometimes it cursed John by name. O.L. Jack Bell. He LL pay for his wicked ways. Sometimes it recited Bible verses, whole chapters, in a voice that didn't belong to anyone living. Some nights, the family sat at the table, frozen in fear, forks halfway to their mouths, while the spirits sang hymns, sweet as a choir girl, only to snarl curses the next moment. Personally, I find this detail odd. Why would a demon sing hymns? Was it mocking their faith or trying to confess? Here's something you might not know. The Bell's eldest son, Richard Williams Bell, wrote it all down. He called his manuscript Our Family Trouble. Martin Ingram later used it in his 1894 book, the first printed record of the haunting. Historians argue whether Ingram added his own flourishes. Maybe he did, but Richard's handwritten pages, they still sit in dusty archives, proof that someone in that house believed deeply that the Bell Witch was real. Outside the farm, the town was buzzing. Some neighbors packed up and moved away. Didn't he want to hear the voice echo across their fields? Others came from miles away, curious, hoping to catch the ghost in the act. They'd sit in the Bell kitchen, coffee cooling in their mugs, ears straining for that faint voice. "I'm Kate. I'll kill Jack Bell. Leave Betsy alone." One night, the witch told a guest what he de-whispered to his wife years before. Words no one else could have known, if you ask me. That's the moment where the story tips from spooky tale to something that chills your bones. How did it know? Some say the haunting was mass hysteria. Others say the Bells faked it. Maybe to cover up family secrets, maybe to settle old scores. But what about the neighbors? Why did so many swear they heard the same voice, saw the same shadows dance across the walls? What do you think? Tell me. In the comments if you spend a night in that house, knowing you might hear Kate whisper your name in the dark. So tonight, if your eyelids are heavy, drift slow, drift soft. What? We're only at the beginning. Betsy's bruises, John's trembling hands, the prayers that broke the silence. All just the first taste. The Bell Witch has so much more to tell you, but for now, rest your head. The knocks on the walls can wait. John Bell's farm is no longer just a farm, it's a stage for fear. Neighbors talk of it at the church steps in the dusty store. While hauling water up from the Red River, it's the first thing they whisper about when the sun slips behind the hills. They call her Kate, as if she's flesh and blood. But no one dares stand alone in those fields after sundown. Inside the house, the witch grows bolder. The knocks turn into slaps. The whispers become arguments. The Bell family learns to sleep with eyes half open, if they sleep at all. Lucy, Bell, the mother, tries kindness. She reads her Bible out loud by candlelight. Sometimes the witch hushes itself, like a snake dozing in the dark. Other nights it laughs at her verses. One night, it said softly, "Lucy is the sweetest woman to ever live. Cruel comfort, because it saved its real venom for John and Betsy." Betsy. Right. Poor Betsy. She's maybe 12 or 13 now. She wakes up with scratches across her arms, hair ripped out in clumps, like the ghost's fingers pulled too hard. When her mother tries to shield her, the witch taunts, "You can't save her, Lucy." It hates Betsy's too, Joshua Gardner, a neighbor boy, good family, simple dreams. He wants to marry Betsy under the same oaks where they played as kids. But every time they meet in the orchard, the voice drifts through the branches. "No, Betsy. No wedding. You will not marry Joshua." Imagine it, being a young girl in love, but every soft secret moment ends with a hiss in your ear. I don't care how brave you think you are. Your knees would knock too. What would you do? Would you run away with Joshua? Gosh. Or break his heart to save his life? The Bell Witch wasn't content just haunting the family. It wanted an audience. So the Bell House became a strange theater. Locals showed up, sat by the fireplace, waited for the show. One cold night, a schoolteacher named Richard Powell, who, by the way, was also in love with Betsy, gathered a few men to confront the spirit. They sat in the parlor, lamps flickering low. Richard asked, "Who are you?" The voice answered, clear as you hear me now, "I am the spirit of a person buried in the woods near the orchard, my grave disturbed." Some say it claimed to be a restless soul. Other nights it said it was Kate Batts spitting revenge from beyond. Which was it? A ghost, a demon, or a clever lie wearing many faces? What do you think? Could a single spirit hold so many secrets? Here's something you might not know. The witch didn't just whisper curses. Sometimes it sang. soft hymns that drifted down the stairs like a lullaby. Then, mid-song, it would switch to filthy curses that turned grown men pale. A neighbor swore he heard the witch recite entire sermons, word for word, from preachers she'd never met. One night she even quoted the Bible in 2 different dialects. Who knows if that's true, but if it is, it's enough to make your spine tighten under the covers. By now, people came from all over Tennessee. Curious folk. Drunks hoping to mock the bells, preachers hoping to drive the devil out. Some left laughing, calling it a family prank, but others left pale, crossing themselves, afraid to speak Kate's name again. One legend says she predicted family secrets, whispered things no stranger should know. One man, a hard skeptic, asked the witch to name his grandmother's maiden name. No one else in the room knew it. Kate said it, clear and smug. The man turned to ice. He never came back. And then there's Andrew Jackson. Yes, that Andrew Jackson. The future president, war hero, rough-tongued, stubborn as iron. He heard the stories, called them nonsense. So he loaded up a wagon with friends and dogs, rode out to the Bell Farm to prove the haunting was fake. But when his wagon reached the property line, the wheels froze. Horses bucked, refused to budge. Men whipped them, cursed. Nothing. Suddenly a voice drifted from the trees. "All right, General, you may go on now." The wheels unlocked. The horses moved. The men stayed the night. But by sunrise, Jackson wanted no more. Some say one of his men got slapped so hard by the invisible witch, his hair stood on end. Did that really happen? Who knows? Jackson never wrote it down, but the bells swore he fled by dawn, muttering he'd seen enough of Kate. Personally, I think if the story scared a man like Jackson, well, that says something. What do you think? Did America's future president run from a ghost? Tell me in the comments. Would you camp out in that house, alone, just to prove you're braver? Meanwhile, the witch turned back to the bells, her favorite prey. John Bell's face began to droop on one side. His tongue would swell till he couldn't speak. Doctors came. But what could they do for a curse? Some nights the witch bragged to guests, "I'm going to kill O.L. Jack." And Betsy? She could barely close her eyes. The bruises, the voices. The threat that if she married Joshua Gardner, her life would unravel. Here's a secret from the old diaries. Betsy tried to break the engagement once. Joshua begged her to stay strong, but Kate's voice wrapped around them like vines. No wedding. No wedding. It's heartbreaking, really. 2 kids in love, but every sweet promise drowned out by a whisper no one else could silence. If you're drifting off now, breathe slow. The winds in Adams, Tennessee, are only getting colder. The witch's laughter still crawls through the orchard. And in the Bell House, the prayers don't seem to work anymore. The ending is waiting. In shadows and poison and secrets the family could never bury. Sleep now, if you dare. We're only halfway through this haunting. By the winter of 1820, John Bell, proud farmer, father of 9, was no longer the man who first pulled that trigger at the strange beast in the corn. Neighbors said his face drooped as if half frozen. Some days his tongue swelled until he could barely speak, just gurgle and rasp while the witch cackled from the rafters. They called it our family trouble. Such a small name for a nightmare that never slept. His wife Lucy, who the witch still called sweet, even precious, tended him day and night. She read psalms over his bed. But the spirit mocked her prayers, crooning soft hymns, one moment hissing curses the next. By now, the farm was a gathering place for every gawker and gossip for miles around. They came to see the man the witch had promised to kill. They sat in the kitchen, the parlor, the hallway, waiting to hear it speak. One night a neighbor asked the voice outright, "Will you stop tormenting this family?" The witch giggled like a child behind the walls. "Not till O.L. Jack's in the ground." Can you imagine that? Hearing your own death sentence echo through your bedroom, night after night, some neighbors urged John to confess. Confess what? Some believed he'd de-wronged Kate Betts. Or someone else. And the witch was just the shape of guilt crawling out of his bones. Maybe the spirit wasn't real at all, just poison on the lips of someone close. Personally, I've always wondered, did someone feed him something bitter drop by drop? What do you think? Was the Bell Witch flesh and bone in disguise? Then came the final morning. December 19th, 1820. John Bell lay in bed, eyes sunk so deep he barely looked alive. Lucy found a small bottle in the cupboard, dark liquid swirling like an oil slick. It hadn't been there before. A neighbor dipped a straw in and gave it to the family cat. The cat convulsed and died before the candle flickered out. The witch's voice rose from the shadows. I gave O.L. Jack a big dose last night. Fixed him good, Lucy wept. The children watched their father slip away, each breath thinner than the last. By dawn, John Bell was gone. The official tale? America's only recorded death by ghost. They buried him under a cedar tree not far from the house. Neighbors gathered for the funeral. Some out of respect, some out of fear they'd be next. As the preacher prayed over the grave, the witch's laughter drifted on the cold wind. Some claimed she sang drinking songs, vile tavern ballads that mocked the solemn faces in black. Can you picture that? A fresh grave, wet soil, still clinging to boots, and a ghost humming a bar song over the dead. Here's something most people miss. The witch didn't stop there. A few nights after the funeral, she turned her spite back on Betsy. She'd promised to ruin Betsy's wedding plans. Joshua Gardner still loved her. He'd stand by her no matter the voice in the trees. But the witch wasn't done. Every night Betsy would lie awake, the voice whispering under her blanket. No wedding, no wedding. She'd find strange bruises on her wrists, like unseen hands had gripped her in her sleep. One night, exhausted and trembling, she broke the engagement.
Oh.
Joshua left heartbroken. Some say he moved away, carrying the echo of the witch with him to his grave. And what about Richard Powell, Betsy's old teacher? Well, here's a theory for you. Some folks whispered Richard always wanted Betsy for himself. Clever, older, patient. Was it him who stirred the rumor, fed the fear, played ghost to clear his path to Betsy's hand? Richard did marry her later, after Joshua vanished from her life. Coincidence? Or a plan that slithered through the walls of the Bell house all along? What do you think? Was Richard Powell the real witch in the dark? Meanwhile, the witch made one last promise before she drifted into the shadows. She told the family she'd be gone for 7 years. I'll return in 1828, she hissed. And like a storm pulling back over the hills, the voice fell silent. For 7 years, the Bells waited for the knock, the whisper, the giggle behind the walls. 7 years of half-sleep, candles burned too low, prayers whispered too late. When 1828 came, she did return, but not to torment the family. This time she spoke only to John Bell Jr. She talked of the past, Civil War still decades away. Strange prophecies about blood and brothers fighting brothers. Then, as sudden as she'd come back, she slipped away again. Some say she still promised to return every 107 years after that. If she kept her word, the Bell Witch should have come again in 1935. Some folks swear she did. Shadows in the orchard, laughter in the old cave. But maybe that's just fear echoing down the family line. If you ask me, the scariest ghosts aren't always spirits. Sometimes they're guilt, envy, betrayal, crawling under your skin long after the last candle burns out. Here's my question. Do you believe the Bell Witch poisoned John? Or did flesh and blood hands do the dirty work, and the ghost was just the cover story? Tell me in the comments, I really want to know. Would you drink from that bottle? Rest easy now. The story isn't quite done. In the next breath, the cave will call us deeper, whispers and shadows tucked under Tennessee's hillsides, waiting for your lantern to flicker. Drift soft, which is watching. After John Bell's grave settled cold under the cedar tree, after Betsy's tears dried and her wedding dress never came out of its chest, the farm should have gone quiet. But the thing about real ghosts, the kind that feed on fear and rumor, is they never really leave. They change shape. They slip into stories. They wait. The Bell land still sits there today. Rich green hills, soft hush of the Red River winding through cottonwood and oak. But there's one place people talk about more than the house. The Bell Witch Cave. A small, damped cavern burrowed into a limestone bluff, just a stone's throw from where John Bell's orchard once grew. Some claim the witch slipped underground, left her mark in the earth itself. They say, if you stand at the cave's mouth at dusk, the air tastes colder than it should. Locals swear the shadows inside move when you're not looking. One old legend tells of Betsy herself. Wandering too close to the cave one rainy evening, she slipped, tumbled down the slick stone mouth. She lay there, stunned, until, as she later told her brothers, something lifted her back out. Invisible hands guiding her up the slope, soft as a mother's touch or a serpent's coil. Personally, I find that detail haunting. Was the witch saving her, or dragging her deeper and letting her go just to remind her who owned the dark? In the late 1800s, Martin Ingram, the man who wrote down the authenticated history of the Bell Witch, stirred the story all over again. He told anyone who'd listened that the cave was the witch's den, her lair, a place where her whispers got trapped in the stone, echoing for anyone brave enough to kneel in the damp dark and listen. Since then, ghost hunters, curious kids, thrill seekers with cheap flashlights, they all make their way to Adams, Tennessee. They step under the tangled limbs, crawl through the low mouth of the cave. They claim to hear footsteps behind them, see handprints pressed into muddy walls, the laugh that comes from no throat you can see. One local tale sticks with me. Back in the 1970s, a group of teenagers dared each other to spend the night inside. They joked, carved their initials in the soft limestone. But by midnight, one boy, the ringleader, vanished down a tight tunnel alone. When his friends found him an hour later, he was curled up by an old flowstone shelf, knees hugged to his chest. He didn't speak a word for 3 days. When he finally did, all he said was, "She told me her name." People come up with all kinds of explanations. Some say it's just air currents, the way caves breathe when the seasons shift. Others think the old stories got folded into tourism. A haunted cave is good business for a sleepy town. But every so often, visitor steps back into daylight looking pale as moon milk, swearing they heard a woman's whisper behind the walls. Come closer. Here's a twist not everyone knows. The witch once promised John Bell Jr. she'd come back. Every 107 years. She told him she'd rise again in 1935. Did she? Hard to say. There's no records of new hauntings. There's no fresh scratches on farmhouse walls. But in the 1930s, the cave did draw new crowds. Thrill seekers, spiritualists, folks who wanted to hold deep underground. Some say that alone fed the story, gave the old spirit fresh breath to drift through new generations. So maybe she never left at all. Maybe she's tucked in those cool rocks, listening to every tour guide, every flashlight beam, every kid daring another kid to say Kate Batts 3 times in the dark. What do you think if you stood in that pitch-black belly of the cave? Would you speak her name out loud? Tell me in the comments. Would you step in alone, lantern in hand, knowing the door behind you might shut itself tight? The Bell Witch story has left books, movies, podcasts, and midnight folklore in its wake. Each new storyteller polishes it different. Some call it America's oldest haunting. Some say it's just old neighbors' gossip, grown teeth and claws over 2 centuries. And some say the real ghosts were human all along. Envy, revenge, greed. The Bell family's secrets buried under dirt and headstones. Personally, I think that's what makes it so chilling. A spirit you can never catch, a story you can never settle. A ghost you help keep alive every time you whisper her name. So tonight, if you're drifting off under your covers, think about this. The Bell Witch might not be a shadow under your bed. She's the voice that drifts through old trees. The echo that breathes back when you speak her name too softly. If you ever find yourself in Adams, Tennessee, stand by that cedar tree where John Bell rests. Peer down into that cave's mouth. Listen. If you hear your name whispered back, well, run or don't. After all, some stories are hungry to be told again. Sleep soft now. The wind outside your window might just be the old witch, brushing past on her way to find her next secret. And if you dream of footsteps behind you, don't look back too fast. What do you think really happened on that farm? Drop your theory in the comments and tell me. Would you step inside that cave alone, midnight mystery friend? The Bell Witch sleeps now. Or maybe she never did. Sweet dreams. Till our next haunting tale,